Let me share some insider news with you. The clothing industry is heading towards a major crisis, and this year we're going to see a lot of it come to light. We've been hearing numerous rumors, and I can confidently say the number of businesses going under isn't just a handful. It's going to be on a massive scale. These aren't just regular shutdowns. We're talking about deliberate and malicious cash-outs, with owners fleeing after liquidating assets. The amounts involved aren't just in the millions, they're in the billions. Rumor has it that places like Puyuan and Pinghu and Zhejiang are going to be hotspots for this kind of activity, and we're already seeing signs of it in Hangzhou. Across the clothing supply chain, it's not just a few companies, it's hundreds. The evidence is clear. For now, the ticking time bomb hasn't fully exploded, but it's only a matter of time. Many of these players aren't even trying to run legitimate businesses anymore. They plan their exits in advance. This is a massive blow to the entire clothing industry, a disaster that will leave significant damage in its wake. My advice to everyone, whether you're a fabric supplier, a manufacturer, or running wholesale retail stores, is to stay cautious and stick to your principles. If you're not careful, you could end up suffering significant losses. This year's troubles are unprecedented, and as time goes on, more cases will emerge. Let's wait and see. China's worsening economy has hit small businesses particularly hard. Recently, online reports reveal that in just 1 month, 26 clothing factory owners in Xucun Town in Zhejiang Province fled their operations. Industry insiders are expressing deep concern, lamenting the grim outlook and warning that the situation is growing increasingly severe. Clothing factory owners had developed a habit of disappearing overnight. When business is bad for them, it's bad for us too. We rely on fabric scraps from these factories to make a living. In the first half of this year, 2 factories in our area suddenly shut down. Everything seemed normal in the morning, but by the next day, the owner was gone. There were no signs they were about to go under. In the second half of the year, 26 more clothing factories have closed down in the same way. Reporting it to the police doesn't help. The owners just claim they have no money to pay us. This industry is in such a slump that factory owners can't even afford to pay wages anymore. In the first half of 2024, public data from 42 apparel brands revealed that 25 of them disclosed changes in store numbers. Among the nearly 97,000 clothing stores, only 41 new ones were added, essentially zero growth. More concerningly, over 3,000 stores closed during the same period, averaging 16 closures per day. When it comes to profitability, data from January to September 2024 shows that textile and apparel companies generated a total profit of 38.1 billion yuan, marking a 2.6% decline. Operating profits stood at 36.8 billion yuan, with a slim profit margin of 3.6%. Meanwhile, 3,500 companies in the sector reported losses, making up 25.3% of the industry. These losses total 7.5 billion yuan, with an average of 2.2 million yuan lost per company. Xiao, a former clothing factory owner in Jiaxing City in Zhejiang Province, shared his challenges with overseas media. Running a small factory is extremely costly, he explained, especially given the razor-thin margins in manufacturing. Seasonal power restrictions in winter and summer forced factories to shut down, causing significant losses as orders went unfulfilled. Payroll deadlines added more stress, often requiring loans just to make ends meet. To make matters worse, rent is expected to increase next year, leaving many businesses with no hope for survival. Xiao elaborated. Some factory owners run away when they can't pay wages, while others fall into depression. When owners flee, workers are left unpaid, often resorting to taking finished or semi-finished products home to try and earn something by processing them. Some factories have their equipment seized by the local labor bureau and auctioned off, but that rarely covers workers' wages. In some cases, factories remain closed indefinitely, and by the time workers return to demand wages, the premises are already emptied out. Even the annual Double 11 shopping festival, typically a chance for businesses to boost sales, brought no relief this year. Shortly after the event, reports surfaced of a clothing factory owner in Shandong village, Haining, Zhejiang, fleeing overnight. The factory was sealed off, and employees were left in the dark. Workers had been working overtime the night before, completely unaware of the impending closure.
In Puyuan, Zhejiang, many factories are basically at a standstill. Don't expect any new designs coming out either. This year's Double 11 sales event saw many e-commerce platforms collapse. Right now, the return rate for women's clothing is as high as 80 to 90%. Selling 10 items and getting 8 returns. It's just wasted effort. At this point, no one in the clothing industry is making any money. The only hope left is for the brick-and-mortar economy to recover because online sales? Sure, The volume might look impressive and the numbers seem good on paper, but the return rates are way too high.
Many business owners have shared their personal experiences about the collapse of the clothing industry. Xucun Town, a former clothing manufacturer in Yiwu City in Zhejiang Province, explained the challenges. We used to process materials for foreign companies, and they always paid on time. After the pandemic, however, many of these companies moved their factories to Southeast Asia, to places like Vietnam and Malaysia. On top of that, the US increased tariffs, making it much harder for Chinese-made products to be exported. Most of our goods now rely on domestic sales, but with people earning less, consumers are more cautious about spending. Clothes aren't selling, products pile up, and businesses can't recover their cash flow. This has caused financial chains to break. Some factories tried to stay afloat by using their own money to fund operations, but when they couldn't get paid from their clients, their cash ran out, leaving them unable to pay their workers. In the end, many owners had no choice but to flee. I even know of a case where the owner of a company took all the money, packed up with his wife and daughter, and escaped to the United States. In Shanghai, Hong Yu, a pseudonym, a veteran clothing retailer who has managed multiple well-known brands for over 20 years, is now on the brink of bankruptcy. He predicts that many brands won't survive the current economic crisis. Hong said, China's footwear and clothing industry is in complete disarray. Not a single Chinese brand has managed to make a significant impact in foreign markets. To compete globally, real brands need 4 to 10 times the pricing power, yet they still find buyers. But here, online sales are continuously declining, and it's nearly impossible to build a brand online. In Hangzhou, 90% of what people call brands aren't real brands at all. Right now, it's a buyer's market. By next year, I expect many brands will have no choice but to downsize. According to data from China's National Bureau of Statistics, retail sales of clothing, shoes, hats, and textiles totaled 1.3 trillion yuan in 2019. By 2023, after 3 years of the pandemic, the figure had fallen to approximately 1 trillion yuan, a nearly 25% decrease in spending on clothing. In recent years, many well-known Chinese brands have either gone bankrupt or significantly reduced their operations. The bankruptcy of La Chapelle, once the top domestic women's clothing brand, sparked widespread regret among consumers. This is especially striking given that China boasts the world's largest and most advanced clothing production system. The country produces more than half the world's apparel, meeting both domestic needs and maintaining a leading position in global exports. China's customs data reveals that clothing exports reached $159 billion in 2023, an 8.5% increase compared to the same period in 2019, before the pandemic. While domestic demand for clothing fell by 23%, exports grew by nearly 9%. This shift highlights the industry's increasing reliance on international markets, with exports now surpassing domestic demand as a primary source of revenue for the sector. What was the market value of China's listed clothing companies before the pandemic? In April 2020, the combined market value of the top 100 listed Chinese clothing companies totaled 730 billion yuan, with an average valuation of 7.3 billion yuan per company. The top 10 companies were Anta Sports, Shenzhou International, Li Ning, Yanggor, HLA, China Dive Water Sports, Yuan Industrial Holdings, Bosi Deng, Samir Garment, and ST and SAT. The top 3 companies, Anta Sports, Shenzhou International, and Li Ning, are listed in Hong Kong. In 2019, both Anta and Shenzhou entered the 100 billion club, with market valuations of 140 billion and 120 billion Hong Kong dollars, respectively. Li Ning followed closely, joining the 50 billion club with a valuation of 54 billion Hong Kong dollars. By 2021, Anta's market value had peaked at 510 billion Hong Kong dollars, while Shenzhou and Li Ning reached 310 billion and 280 billion, respectively. How are they doing in 2024? By 2024, the market values of these companies have significantly declined. Anta Sports is now valued at 210 billion Hong Kong dollars, down more than 50% from its peak in 2021. Shenzhou International has dropped to 92.5 billion, a loss of 200 billion. Li Ning's market value has fallen to approximately 37 billion, marking a decline of 240 billion. The downturn extends beyond these top companies. For instance, HLA, ranked 5th, had around 8,200 stores at the end of 2022, but closed 2,200 stores in 2023 alone. In mid-November this year, La Chapelle, China's first domestic women's clothing brand listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, officially announced its delisting. The company had filed for bankruptcy liquidation as early as June the previous year. La Chapelle, which went public on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange in 2014 and the Shanghai Stock Exchange in 2017, once operated nearly 10,000 directly owned stores at its peak. Similarly, another domestic clothing brand, Xucun, recently made headlines when reports revealed it has shut down all 800 of its physical stores. Semir Garment also posted its worst performance since its listing 12 years ago. In 2023, the company's revenue dropped to 13 billion yuan, with net profit plummeting 57% to just 600 million yuan. In 2019, before the pandemic, Semir's revenue had been close to 20 billion yuan. Its workforce has also been cut in half, from 6,500 employees in 2019 to just 3,200 by 2022. Compared to the other companies that have gone bankrupt, Semir is still in relatively better shape. Looking back at Meters Bongwi's peak, the brand made its debut on the A-share market in 2008, becoming the first stock in casual wear, with a market value of 38.9 billion yuan on its first day of trading. In the same year, its founder, Zhou Chenjian, topped the Forbes China Rich list for Zhejiang Province with a net worth of 13.6 billion yuan, surpassing other Zhejiang business tycoons. Today, however, Meters Bongwi is hanging by a thread. Its stock price recently dipped as low as 1.01 yuan, dangerously close to the delisting threshold, with a current market value of only 4.4 billion yuan. Under the pressure of ongoing performance losses, store closures, and declining brand recognition, Meters Bongwi is being abandoned by the capital market. Foreign fashion brands have been steadily pulling out of China. Brands like Zara, H&M, C&A, Old Navy, New Look, and Forever 21, which once reigned supreme in prime mall locations, are now either closing down or significantly scaling back their operations. According to Inditex, Zara's parent company, the number of Zara stores in mainland China fell from 183 in 2018 to just 96 by January 2024. Reports suggest that by the end of 2024, the number may drop to around 60. There are even rumors that Zara is considering closing its Shanghai office, which could signal a full withdrawal from the Chinese market. In the first half of 2024, the combined net profit for 42 listed clothing companies in China was a mere 6.7 billion yuan. Half of these companies were in the red, with over 10,000 stores closing down during this period. Among the 13,635 apparel companies generating annual main business revenue of 20 million yuan or more, nearly 30% reported losses from January to June 2024. From 2020 to 2023, annual losses in the industry consistently exceeded 20%. If even the strongest listed and foreign apparel companies in China are reporting massive losses, smaller brands are finding survival almost impossible. Unfortunately, the real numbers on clothing company closures in China are hidden. Estimates suggest that at least 30% of businesses are in the red, creating a vicious cycle of fierce competition within the industry. In 2024, the clothing industry's crisis isn't just economic, there's also a collapse in brand reputation. As the industry evolves, the true nature of many brands is coming to light. Behind high prices often lie substandard materials and questionable production processes. Consumers are buying not just clothes but also brand identity, and that trust is now under massive strain. Recent controversies like the 70,000 children's down jackets failing safety tests and reports of well-known brands using substandard materials have rocked the market. Consumers are venting their frustration and disappointment on social media, questioning, what can we even trust anymore? It's not just one brand. Many major clothing retailers are accused of misleading advertising regarding fabric quality and manufacturing techniques. As public opinion worsens, consumers are increasingly re-evaluating their brand preferences. The fast fashion model has also stirred debate. To keep up with trends, these brands ramp up production and lure customers with low prices. But this haste clearly compromises quality. Many find their purchases fading or deforming only after a few wears, which is heart-wrenching. One internet user quipped, "I cry when I buy, and I cry when I wear." This growing mistrust has also affected industry professionals, from designers to factory workers. Everyone is feeling the pressure. Some designers have openly admitted, we can no longer prioritize quality because the market doesn't allow it. This raises the question, when will this vicious cycle end? Some online commentators cynically suggested that if this cycle stops, so does China's economy, reflecting the broader economic slump. The clothing sector employs around 170 million people in China. If unemployment in this sector hits 30 to 50%, the numbers would be staggering. China might be facing an economic crisis that rivals the U.S. Great Depression of 1929 to 1933, when incomes dropped by 20 to 50%, unemployment reached 25%, and both stocks and property values crashed, leaving people hopeless about the future. Now, the wealth of Chinese citizens, mainly in real estate, has shrunk by at least 30 to 50%, with many homes now unpayable. Consumption has plummeted. Unemployment has soared, with youth unemployment possibly at 40%. Businesses are failing left and right, and the financial sector is in turmoil. On top of the economic doldrums, factories must deal with overcapacity, lack of funds, weak demand, and intense competition, making survival a steep climb. While Chinese leaders promised more economic stimulus in mid-December, including rate cuts and more government borrowing, Beijing faces increasing pressure. With the incoming U.S. administration set to raise tariffs, China's efforts to offload excess production to the U.S. will become even harder, leading to more goods saturating the domestic market and driving prices down further. Given this grim scenario, some boldly predict that many business owners won't survive this winter.
许多老板大概率是熬不过今年冬天的。
Many business owners probably won't make it through this winter. Don't think I'm exaggerating. Just look at Wuhan. A wave of loan defaults is either already happening or on its way. In the past, when housing prices were climbing, people borrowed money to invest or speculate in real estate. Even if they lost money, it wasn't a big deal. Property prices could rise by thousands overnight, easily covering their losses. But now, with housing prices falling, those who counted on rising values to plug financial gaps are in serious trouble. Their houses have turned into massive liabilities. The old financial holes haven't been filled, and now there are even bigger ones. Even selling the properties won't be enough to make up for the losses. It used to be so easy to make money in real estate, but now it's just as painful to stay afloat. Look around at the shops on the streets. How many are truly thriving? Most are barely scraping by, holding on to cash flow as long as they can. Once that dries up, they're finished. Families are cutting back too, only spending on essentials. Beyond necessities, they're unwilling to spend even a penny more. Some online platforms are exploiting this situation, squeezing profits from struggling businesses. At first, consumers might feel like they're getting small discounts, but eventually, these platforms will trap them too. Meanwhile, small businesses have no escape. They're slowly dying or just waiting to exit the market altogether.